Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting episode of Run and Gun Radio. Today's episode will be all about the brand new Capcom third-person action shooter, Exoprimal. All the dinosaurs in the universe are going to be raining down on our heads, and as long as you can overlook some really weird writing and acting in the story bits around the outside, this gameplay is absolutely fantastic. So don't touch that dial. I have got 3 very simple strategies for 3 very simple exosuits that are going to make your early days in Exoprimal a lot more fun. So let's get started. The number 1 exosuit on the list is an assault type exosuit. This is a DPS. This exosuit is called Deadeye. It is probably going to be the one that you are going to see a lot of other players picking early on in the game, and I promise you the later that you get, that isn't going to change because Deadeye is an incredibly solid exosuit with easy to understand buttons and some decent mobility as the game progresses. The perks that this exosuit gets later on will make it an absolute machine gun maniac. But all that being said, there is a couple things to know about the skills, and then we can talk about what makes this suit so good for getting started in Exoprimal. Now, Deadeye's abilities are all very soldier-centric, and you shouldn't expect anything super new to break the mold with this exosuit. That means your main weapon is going to be your machine gun with a 40-round mag. Next is your grenade launcher on an almost 20-second cooldown, but this is one of the bread and butter buttons for Deadeye, so that cooldown is going to be every bit worth what your grenade launcher can do. You also have a combat roll on about a 4 to 6 second cooldown, depending on the upgrades that you can take for it later on, but it is just a roll. Think Dark Souls, except you've got a cooldown on it so you can't spam roll. That is going to be par for the course for a lot of exosuits in this game. Everybody's got a cooldown on their dodge, but Deadeye has one of the lower ones, and that is going to be really good when you start getting a lot of levels into this suit, but that's for another video. The final ability, basic ability on your toolkit toolbar is going to be your melee. Your punch with Deadeye is pretty straightforward if you just tap the button, but you can hold the button down to charge it, and as you do charge it, you can continue to walk around, but when it's fully charged, the AoE that you get on this huge Superman punch is going to take out tons and tons of dinos. If you ever want to feel like a total badass on a machine gun wielding soldier character, just hold down that right bumper, walk into a crowd of raptors, and then watch them explode. Your ultimate with Deadeye is fantastic. It is called Cluster Salvo. When you have your ultimate entirely charged up, you can do it from the ground, you can do it from the air, but what you'll do is press your Y and B buttons on your controller to pull out tons of guns that are just going to shoot out of your suit and unleash a ridiculous hail of gunfire at everything in front of you. The damage is very good, maybe not enough to kill an entire big dino all by your lonesome, but it is going to be enough to kill quite a few exosuits in the PvP mode and take a very big chunk off of your Triceratops, your Carnotaurus, your big bad boys. If you are using this exosuit, the ult charge is not the fastest thing in the world, but this ultimate will absolutely turn the tide of a losing battle as long as it's relatively close. I do have a couple gripes with the pacing of the PvP aspect of this game, but we'll talk about that in another video. Suffice it to say, Deadeye's ultimate, the Cluster Salvo, is incredibly good for wiping out big chunks of big dino health, or if you can get a pretty decent flank on an enemy team in one of these final missions, you can absolutely shred 2 to 3 of them from about 100 to 0 if you're landing enough of your salvo. So Deadeye's ultimate is 100% worth it, and you should be saving it for really, really important points in your mission. Another thing to note is that when you are starting out with any exosuit, it is going to be incredibly smart to keep the cannon upgrade, or the cannon attachment, for whichever exosuit you're playing. Even if you're on a healer, even if you're on a tank, at least early on in the game, cannon is going to be the equipment that you want, because the AoE that it drops and the amount of crowd control, well, not in this case, stunning, more crowd control through means of AoE death, but cannon is going to be your rock solid corridor clearing beam cannon straight out of Gundam. Cannon is undoubtedly the best early game shoulder weapon, and you really don't need to take anything else until you start getting a real solid feel for the suit that you're playing and unlocked a lot of their perks. So this is a blanket just blanket advice for everyone who is playing the game early on. Take cannon for as long as you can, as long as it makes sense to, and then once you have really buried the niche in your favorite suit, then start switching over to experiment with those other shoulder-mounted weapons. Now, when you are playing a DPS character like Deadeye, you are going to want to deal DPS. I know, it's just so mind-boggling to think that that's your only mission in life, but you got a big gun, you pull a big trigger, you make the dinos big dead, and that is it. However, with Deadeye, there are a couple nuances to this. Your machine gun is going to be doing the most focused damage to big dinosaurs, and you will want to be hitting them in the head to do so. With the exception of the Triceratops, all dinosaurs should be headshots for you, and that is going to make your gun deal more damage. That's just how it works. Another thing that you need to know as the DPS with the straight shooting machine gun is that it is your responsibility to take out the flyers. Pteranodons and the morphed Pteranodons that you'll see later on in the game are a huge headache because the game is going to require you to kill a certain number of them, but people like your tank, your roadblocks, your Zephyrs, your any melee character are going to have an absolutely ridiculously difficult time tracking down those Pteranodons to get the mission done. So anytime that you see Pteranodons on the mission list, which is up in the middle of the two competition bars at the top of the screen, you're going to want to find those Pteranodons and take them out. That is your whole job, and with a little help from a friendly Krieger, that can be a 2 to 3 second ordeal depending on how fast they spawn. For other things going on with Deadeye, you'll want to save your grenade since it is on a really big cooldown. You want to save that for big groups of raptors. Raptors spawn by the sometimes 10 to 20, and if you can hit a big number of raptors with one grenade and kill them, you have more than made up for that 20-second cooldown. Now what you're seeing right now is the Dominator. This is given to both teams during the final mission. The losing team gets it earlier and the winning team gets it later, but ultimately it's just a better idea to hang on to it as long as possible so you can do something like this. When you have the Carnotaurus or the Triceratops, when you have the big bad dinosaur and you can just run it into the enemy team and chase them all down, munching on their health bars like nothing stands in your way, then you can make sure that your team gets the very easy win. The dinosaurs don't last forever, and they don't necessarily stand up very well under focused ultimate fire from the enemy team. So if they have a bunch of ults charged up to kill your dino with, maybe don't waste it. Unless you're in the last couple seconds of the game and you need that Hail Mary right away, sometimes it's better to hold on to the dino as long as you can. Luckily, at this point in this mission with the data keys, there is enough backup from our team that I can put down the I can put down the Dominator, get the Carnotaurus right on top of the entire enemy team, smash their data key, and have a whole bunch of backup to keep the dinosaur alive for almost the entire duration. So the Dominator is a ridiculously good tool. Just make sure that you're using it at the appropriate moments, because sometimes it is easy to waste those things, and it's not a good idea to do so. Anyway, that's Deadeye in a nutshell. Really easy to play, especially with the cannon. Just remember to keep your grenade launcher in check. You want to use that for the right groups of raptors, the right groups of enemies. You want to make sure that you're putting your machine gun down on the big dinosaurs in the face for as long and as humanly possible. And then as far as everything else goes for Deadeye, just stay alive. Hunt down those pteranodons, make sure that you're doing the right DPS in the right place so that your team can carry you on their backs as they do all the really hard work. Now the next suit on the list is one that you will see a lot as well, but you may see it less than the Deadeye model. This is the Witch Doctor. This is the first support class. No, it's not the first, because there are basically all of the suits unlocked right away, because if they locked them any more than they already have, things would be pretty gross, because this game costs $60, so I better have access to everything. It is the easiest to get started with, though. As a support class, the Witch Doctor is incredibly strong, has tons of AoE heals, has a targeted heal as well, and comes with some pretty strong mobility options on top of all that healing. Now to start things off, the Witch Doctor does not have a standard auto attack like a lot of other suits will in the game, whereas things like Deadeye have the machine gun and Roadblock just has a straight melee. The Witch Doctor has what's called the Neuro Rod, and this is just going to be similar to Winston's weapon in Overwatch. This rod is going to let you electrocute dinosaurs in a cone in front of you. The reach is not very far, but ultimately what this rod is going to do is small amounts of damage, and it will lead up to a stun for the dinosaurs that you are hitting. If you're hitting big groups of raptors with it, they will be stunned relatively quickly. If you are hitting things like the Pachycephalosaurus, which is the helmet headbutt dinosaurs, those guys take a little bit more time from your stun rod to knock them down. And then obviously big dinos like the Carnotaurus and the Triceratops take an incredibly long time to stun, but as long as you're keeping your rod on them, you're dealing damage to them, so it's not a bad idea to keep it going, even though sometimes it can feel more like a tickle beam. That being said, you can power it up if you land the heal that you have on your left trigger. You are going to buff the beam in that it will stun harder, stun faster, and do more damage. On top of that, the beam doesn't have a typical reload animation like a lot of other weapons will in the game. It has a cooldown period, much like Krieger's Gatling gun, that has a heating period. So you have infinite ammo on this weapon. You just have to keep track of the bar that is going down in the middle of your screen, because if you hit 0, you're going to be forced to recharge it, and you won't be able to use it until it gets up to halfway full on the energy bar. So, that being said, it's pretty easy to manage. I wouldn't worry a whole lot about using this weapon. Just make sure that you're zapping the right enemies, keeping it trained on as many important targets as you can. That out of the way, the offensive part of the Witch Doctor done, we can talk about what the class really actually excels at, which is healing. The two forms of healing that they've got are, like I said, your big one, the one that's going to heal you as well as your entire team, is the healing field. That's our right bumper. This thing comes with 2 charges, and it's just going to drop an enormous green circle on the ground that heals up slowly anybody standing in it on your team. So that, in and of itself, is going to keep lots of people alive, and especially tank characters like Krieger and Roadblock. they will get absolutely incredible use out of your healing field, because that is going to be a slow ticking heal, whereas they take very small amounts of damage over time. Am I going to get run over? No. Absolutely magic that revive happened directly in front of the Triceratops. That is another really cool part about playing support, is that you do not draw a lot of aggro from the monsters. It is mostly your responsibility to keep everybody alive, so at least the big boys don't pay attention to you. They look more at the DPS, shooting them in the face constantly. So, that being said though, healing field incredibly good for your entire team, whereas the next healing ability is going to be much more concentrated. Feed is the single target ability, and that is going to heal your allies as well as give them a movement speed boost. And if you use feed on an enemy, this is actually going to steal energy from them and recharge your neuro rod. So, like I mentioned earlier, when you hit someone with feed that is not an ally, you're going to get energy back for your rod, and you're going to be dealing more damage because you don't have to worry about the cooldown period. You can just hold that bad boy down and zap people into eternity. It is incredibly helpful, and that being said, feed is super strong for big chunks of healing on a single target. So ultimately, you're going to be using it more for friendly healing, but remember, it does have an offensive component to it as well if you are ever in a pinch. Now, the other really cool part about the Witch Doctor is his mobility ability. His left bumper, like I mentioned with Deadeye, is going to actually launch the Witch Doctor into the air. He's going to be doing a giant front flip really, really far, actually. The distance is nuts. But when you are up there, you can hit the button again to jump a second time, making the distance even, I'd go so far to say, is almost double the original length of time that you can jump. On top of that, the thing that I forgot to mention that you can see is the Witch Doctor can take his hat off to float like a little umbrella, like Mary freaking Poppins. The Witch Doctor can take his hat off and stay in the sky, away from the hordes of raptors and Ankylosaurus hiding down on our point, taking me out. We don't have a whole lot of DPS. The whole team is split up for this objective, which is a little bit unfortunate, but luckily my buddies are here just in time to get me back up so that I can keep them alive to keep this point collected. This is one of the better PvP missions, I think. This feels much more Modern Warfare 2 to me, where you're taking points, you're taking objectives, you're fighting back and forth with the enemy team while tons and tons of dinos are raining down on everybody, trying to get to 100% first. It is actually incredibly fun. But that being said, there are a ton of different mission types in this game, and the PvP aspect is surprisingly fun. It's surprisingly fun, especially if you can sneak up on the enemy team with a big ultimate. Things are going to get real fun real fast. For you, not so much for them, especially if they all explode. But there you can see the Witch Doctor's leap magically getting us out of all danger, because it is just so high, so far, and so ready to pounce. And then finally, the Witch Doctor's ultimate ability is going to be the Vital Aura. Vital Aura is going to be just a huge AoE heal, and it's going to heal all of your teammates while greatly increasing their defense. So they'll be able to take more damage with their full health bar. On top of that, if you have enemies in that AoE as well, they are going to have their movement speed slowed, and that small CC is pretty helpful. So just remember, when you hit that button, you're going to heal your whole team, you're going to make them much more tanky, and if there are enemies around, they're going to be slower. Pretty simple, pretty standard healer ultimate, but all things considered, it's not any less impactful because it doesn't deal damage. Now, the big thing to remember about the Witch Doctor is that it's a healer. It is really just built to keep your team alive. So that is the whole strategy for this character, is just picking it. It's really quite simple early on because a lot of people don't really want to play healer. People don't want to play support, and if you can be that guy for your team, even if you're carrying a cannon on your back, they're going to live a lot longer, they're going to deal a lot more DPS, and ultimately you are going to win a lot more games because you don't have to worry about so many, dumpy idiots killing themselves at the worst possible moment to do so. Witch Doctor is perfect for keeping your buddies alive, and especially if you are able to get a group of people to play this game, which might be a little hard because it's so expensive. But if you can get a group of people to play this game, the Witch Doctor in coordinated play can be absolutely untouchable with the amount of healing that he can do, and with the amount of support from a guaranteed teammate who is on comms with you, who is trying hard, who wants to win the game. It is good stuff. Now, the last suit on the list is still very simple to play, but the use of this exosuit cannot be understated. Roadblock is one of the absolute best exosuits in the game for a number of reasons, and if you don't have one of these on your team, things get infinitely more difficult because just like Reinhardt, this character tanks a lot of damage, tanks a lot of aggro, and otherwise causes huge amounts of disruption to both enemy exosuits and dinosaurs. So let's talk about them abilities because they are all very important to Roadblock's kit. Number one, super important ability, you can see it all the time anyway, it's just the enormous shield that Roadblock puts in front of him. Now, shields work a little bit differently than they do in other games in Exoprimal, in that your Roadblock shield is actually going to stop small dinosaurs like raptors from advancing. Same thing with medium dinosaurs, even though things like the Packy can ram your shield to break it, it will still keep them away. But if there are a bunch of raptors in front of you, you can hold up your shield, pile them up, and then have your Deadeye launch a grenade into it and get an easy, clean, like 10 to 20 kills with just you standing in front as the tank. Not only that, but your next ability, your taunt, will actually pull tons and tons of dinosaurs towards you so you can hold them back with your shield even more. That is the core gameplay loop of Roadblock. It's taunt them, get them to attack you, pull your shield up, and watch your team absolutely shred everybody because your shield is the entire screen large and you can just hold all the dinosaurs back. It is crazy how good the combo is. On top of that, however, Roadblock has a melee attack unlike both of the suits previous in this video. His melee attack is very large and it is a 2-hit combo. The first punch is going to deal damage, the second punch is going to deal damage and knock enemies away. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I'll let you be the person who decides when and where to punch. But remember, that first punch is going to deal damage, but it's not going to ruin anybody's shot behind you because you're not going to send any dinosaurs flying. You're just going to give them a one tap, put your shield back up, and then watch them melt because they took a bunch of damage from your giant robot fists. Now, the next ability I want to talk about is your dash, actually. Roadblock has the probably, I would say, weakest dash in terms of... I think it's fair to say all the exosuits, this is probably the most lackluster. Deadeye is one up from this, but I'd still say probably the weakest because it's just movement. You just go in one direction and it's an evade. It's pretty quick. I mean, it's not like, you know, having a dodge button is bad, but being the tank, being that you're so huge and that you want a lot of stuff just coming right at you, you don't really dodge a whole lot. You know, it's just kind of a button that goes to waste. That being said, not having a button isn't a big deal for Roadblock because his other buttons are so ridiculously good. Now, the last basic ability that Roadblock has requires that you put your shield up, and it is just going to be his Shield Blast. You can see it right there, absolutely eviscerating a ton of raptors who get up front. And let's talk about the ultimate, because you can just see it in action right here, baby. Look at that tornado of dinosaurs. Watch the ticker on top with those raptors just go so up fast. It's awesome. This is one of the most cinematic ults in the game, and it's called Storm Drive. It lets your Roadblock spin in a whole big ass circle, and it is going to deal damage while doing that tornado, and you can end it early with your Haymaker. So you just hit the button again while you are in your ultimate, and Roadblock will do a huge uppercut with his big robot fist, destroying anything in the tornado. It is incredibly strong CC wise, incredibly good for damage, and it is going to just absolutely rain hell upon anybody dumb enough to get caught in it. So if you see a Roadblock running at you without any of his buttons up, remember that ult is coming, and you're probably going to get punched into the stratosphere. And remember also, Roadblock isn't just built for blocking dinos. Roadblock's taunt is also going to work against your enemy Exosuits. In fact, the taunt, when used on them, is going to reduce their evasiveness. So it's basically going to slow them down when they're taunted, and I think... I can't remember specifically because I don't know if anyone has hit me with it, but I want to say it turns off maybe 1 or 2 abilities. I could be wrong about that, so if you know, feel free to correct me, but the taunt itself is still usable on enemy Exosuits, so don't feel like you don't have to hit that button if the enemy players are the only thing around. Right now we are waiting for our teammate with our big Omega Hammer to hit the big Omega Nail and knock down the wall. This game mode is one of the better final missions in my opinion. This is probably my favorite actually, because it is just so adrenaline pumping action goodness, and there's really not much more to say about it. If you are the person to pick up the hammer, make sure that you do not need your mobility abilities, otherwise you are going to suck with the hammer. It's typically best to let your tanks pick up the hammer, or your characters who don't need their movement abilities in order to be more efficient. So people like Roadblock don't need their dash. Your dash gets taken away when you have the hammer because it's so big and heavy, and if you rely on your back weapon, that also is going to be taken away when you have the hammer because it's sitting on your back. It's huge, and that button is now going to allow you to do the hammer swing. When you have the hammer equipped, you lay it down, you kill enemies with it, and the more enemies that you kill, the more damage that you deal with the hammer charges the objective. Once you get to 100%, you can hit these big Omega containers on the map to push forward. Those are going to let you knock down the walls, move on to the next objective, but the way that you charge the hammer again is killing enemies with it. If you kill a big dino like a Carnotaurus or a Triceratops with the hammer, it will give you a 100% charge because it is pretty difficult to land the killing blow with the Omega hammer. However, if you're killing things like raptors or the Packies with it, you can get that charge built up slower, but it's more consistent. The hammer has a 20-second cooldown on it, so basically anytime you get a big clump of raptors, it's probably worth it to rip it. Otherwise, let your team soften up those Carnotaurus, those Triceratops, those Packies, and lay the hammer down for a much bigger boost of Omega energy, or whatever they call it in this game. It's the charge. Right now you can see my team is kind of failing miserably at charging up that hammer, but we'll save the best for last. Now, this mission specifically is also really good for Roadblock because there are quite a few avenues to shoot from, but Roadblock, I want to keep saying Roblox because it's oof, but you're very, very good at blocking for your teammates because that shield is so big, and chasing people down just like this isn't very difficult either when they're carrying around that big hammer that ruins all of their mobility. And now we can just sit on top of it, hold our shield up, and keep our Vigilant. Our Vigilant behind us alive so she can snipe everything else going on. The Triceratops is down. We just gotta hold out here until our team can charge up our hammer and dodge all the sniper fire coming from the enemy Vigilant and the Neo Sniper dinosaur sitting over there on the right. It's a little bit rough going. We just want to make sure that the enemy team doesn't get anywhere near their hammer to pick it up until it resets. I'm going to try to get the revive, but I'm not going to get it because the enemy Vigilant is absolutely popping heads. I think we bought enough time though, because either that hammer is going to reset. It looks like somebody on the enemy team may be coming for it, but yeah, we'll see. There it is. There's the reset. They've got the hammer back, and now we are about on par. One more good hammer swing into a group of raptors and we'll be at 100%, so we just have to charge that hammer and go smack the nail. There is yet another Triceratops rolling around. Is that ours? Did we dominate one? I can't tell. Nope, that is definitely not ours. Looks like it's just a plain old Triceratops. Really no, that's the dominated enemy one. I thought we already killed that one. Huh. Well, as it is, it's Triceratops, it's grumpy, it's a bad guy, and it's kind of messing with everybody's steez. So, who has our hammer right now? Like I said, it should be on one of the tanks. It is currently on our Krieger. You can see that on the icon in the bottom left next to his name. So I want to keep the hammer away from the objective, the enemy hammer, and you can see our shield blocked that whole impact. So stuff is crazy. And their hammer carrier just got obliterated from the other side of the map. Looks like our snipers are getting chased down too. I can only hold the shield up for so long. I just need our... Oh, he dropped it behind me. Dang it. Almost there. So now the tank has got the hammer. We've got our buddies revived. We're at 100%. I just need some space to let it go. We're getting shot at right now, but Krieger drops his dome shield. I've got my shield up. We just got to get these bad boys out of our radius, and that is it. The final charge is complete. The hammer is dropped, and the enemy team gets deleted. Big boy gets the hammer. Don't ever forget it. That's it for me, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you all next time. Peace out.